Thank you for participating in this Zoom presentation. It's in regards to our Empowering Women of America Warrior One project. And we're talking tonight about coronavirus pandemic, child sexual exploitation with the cryptocurrency and the dark net. It's a lot of information to cover, but I'll try to keep it simple, not get too complicated with the technical aspects of it. But I do want to express how big this is. Since COVID-19 has affected all our lives, it has also affected children, and the sexual exploitation of children and women are pretty crazy right now. As of probably a month ago, there's 45 million online photos and videos of children, some as young as 3, that are being abused sexually or tortured. And some of this violence depicts sex slavery as well. So it's a global issue. It's horrible. These online predators are on the dark and the deep web, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But law enforcement really doesn't have the ability to track all these predators, and it's become a very complex scenario because they just cannot get caught with all the encryption software and the search engines. There's just thousands of them. It's pretty incredible what you see out there. Right now, because of COVID-19, children have their phones on them. They're operating their smartphones with cameras. They're using their computers. They're not being checked. So children are isolated. They're not really being monitored by parents or teachers like the old days. So with that being said, there's going to be a little bit of a basic stumble to get to where we need to go with this conversation about child sexual exploitation. But the COVID-19 has really did a lot of damage to our society throughout the world. And New Jersey, online child exploitation is up 75%. New York has advertisements on the dark web for child and women, or children and women, being sexually traded, and they're advertising virus-free, willing to wear a mask and gloves during the acts. So that's how serious this is. There's an uprising in community and faith-based organizations linked to human trafficking throughout the world. So 1 out of 5 children are sexually propositioned through platforms and social media. So if you can imagine 1 out of 5 children, that is incredible numbers. Now, with that being said, you have an uprising webcamming, just like what we're doing now. Can you imagine if we were pedophiles or criminals? We would basically exchange photos and illicit pictures and do odd things on this meeting. So there's opportunity. Just to give you an example, from January through June 2020, there's a 90% increase in online enticements of cyber tip line. Basically, people calling in, parents calling in, saying my kid's been enticed by an online predator. And that's huge. And that's during this COVID crazy stuff. So what is the deal with this COVID-19 and child sexual exploitation, though? We know the schools are closed. Most of the schools are closed. They're starting to reopen, but teachers actually were great reporting mechanisms. They could sense the behavior of basically kids being abused. They sense the isolation. They sense the withdrawal from the other students. So without those teachers reporting, basically we have a huge influx of children being subjected to these crimes. There's now an increase in incest, family violence, and sexual abuse with ongoing lockdown. So you have the stress level of no jobs, you have the stress level of schools not being open, the stress level of cabin fever, so all these things. And if you have a dysfunctional family environment, you're going to have an issue with children being abused at home, either violently or sexually. Now, of course, we do have travel restrictions. Now, those travel restrictions actually aided and abetted online child pornography. Now, can you imagine pedophiles actually having to go into the computer to find their deviant behavior? Basically, instead of traveling, they just go online, and that's where the sale of pornography, the violence, the sextortion is happening. So there's an economic increase with these pedophiles because they're trading and selling these products. Now, also, there's a big increase in sextortion where the handler or the pedophile basically manipulates a child or a woman to do certain things. And then if photos are exchanged that are inappropriate, the handler threatens to put it online, all social media platforms. So the person, the victim, continues the behavior or goes further and meets the predator at a certain destination and then actually participates in a physical relationship. So it could be increase in, extortion or sextortion. It could be pressure by family, just, being isolated. It could be pressure by money or social attention or the enticement of drugs. There's an incident in Virginia where college students have been basically providing sexual material for drugs, and the drugs will be dropped off at the door. So it's incredible what we're going through right now in this society. Now, the reason why children are sexually exploited is we're in uncertain times. We have child anxieties, we have adult anxieties, and children are unsupervised. There's lack of parental guidance, there's a lack of restrictions on the computer, no oversight your phones. There's no or little conversation about the risk, and there's no privacy settings for social media. And of course, the isolation and little parent involvement means that these kids are going to gaming room sites. These kids are going to social media sites, and they're actually communicating with these handlers or these molesters or child pedophiles. And the pedophile can hide his identity, change his age group or whatever. He can fake all this stuff, unbeknownst to the child, thinking that he or she is talking to a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, is actually talking to an adult male who's basically preying on this potential victim. So we have all those uncertainties going on. Now, the biggest thing that what I see is just like when I was a sex offender officer in Florida, sex offenders are great at basically manipulating a person. They gain the trust of that person. Casual contact, social contact, again, the chat rooms, the gaming rooms, they befriend the child or the victim. And then once they befriend them, things start happening. They have a sexual conversation. Then eventually they exchange images of each other. And that's again where the sextortion comes up, where there's threats of the images being posted on social media. So the victim goes along to get along to avoid the embarrassment of those sexually explicit photos online. And of course, that leads to physically meeting the child in person, which is a risk for human trafficking or child sex trafficking. So all these things are going on, and it can go quickly. It can go 0 to 100 miles an hour in a day or two, just because the child isn't mature enough to stop doing what he or she is doing, or afraid to be embarrassed about the videos or the pictures or whatever. Or the child could be curious. So it's all parental discussion, all parental guidelines and boundaries that we need to set for these kids. So that being said, you have an internet that's out of control, and the internet is out of control because we used to control it prior to the Obama days. The U.S. government, through the Commerce Department, controlled the internet up to President Obama, and then President Obama handed it over to the Internet Corporation Assigned Names and Numbers. It's called ICANN, ICANN, and that formed in 1998. It's a nonprofit, and it helps develop policy. The problem is it's not a regulatory issue or a government. It's not a regulatory body where they can provide sanctions for somebody who violates stuff or violates the ethics of our society. And it's open to everybody. It's borderless. So it's made up of global governments, corporations, individuals. So it's all over the place. And I believe Senator Ted Cruz from Texas opposed handing over the internet to this nonprofit company out of California, which is understandable. Now we see problems in our political arena with the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, the authority of Section 230, I believe, and that's the Communications Decency Act. So the Communications Decency Act basically gives immunity to like Facebook, Twitter, all these other platforms for basically moderating content. They are not required to moderate the content. So all they can do is just simply, like we have seen in the past, they can just take someone offline, but that's it. But there's no fines, no lawsuits that could happen with that Section 230. So that's why we're having a problem at this time with our politics, with our sexual exploitation of kids online. The dark web is crazy. And what facilitated all that is simply the dark web being created by our own government. It was created by the Navy. You may have heard the site Tor. It's a web platform or onion router. Those things were developed by the Navy, handed over basically to our CIA, and they made their own Tor network for investigations, for intelligence gathering, for being protective of information. Well, it turns out it's just the opposite. It's turning into where more criminals are on the dark web or the dark net than they are good guys. So you have no logs of your activity. You have multiple layers of sites you're going through where it's hidden. So there's volunteers throughout the world who basically navigate your information through their routers. That way it could be hidden from public view. Not to say law enforcement doesn't see some of this, but there's so much of it, they're understaffed and it's hard to do it. The fact, if you think about that being encrypted, can you imagine using only virtual currency for paying for all this stuff, this criminal behavior, from drugs to sex to slavery, all this other bombs or whatever. So that's why it's so difficult now. We have COVID-19 just isolating a lot of people. You have a bunch of pedophiles building up platforms and websites on the dark net, soliciting other pedophiles, and you're enticing kids and women on these sites to do certain things, either for money, drugs, or whatever. Then you have the Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is basically a blockchain tracking software where it's hard to even fathom where the original person is. It goes through so many places that it's impossible really to find who the original purchaser of that Bitcoin. Give you an example, I think of December, of Bitcoin, one Bitcoin was worth $18,135. So you can imagine the money going into the dark web, and everything's a fee. So if I wanted to go to the dark web and go to a certain site, I would have to pay a fee to just even observe. And that's where they get the money. That's why it's such a multi-billion-dollar operation. Now, the negative aspects, of course, are fraud. You know, as a bank investigator, I see a lot of fraud, and I see Bitcoin use or virtual currency use. You could be anonymous. There's a global criminal market. There's a global criminal appetite for children and pornography. You can have a false identity or impersonate somebody. You know, who's to know? No accountability, no government oversight, other than once in a while you see the FBI or Joint Task Force blocking a site or taking a site down. and that's it. But there's so many, just like the Silk Road was taken down years ago, probably 100 other types of Silk Road websites came up in place of it. So the biggest thing is now you have a subscription-based service and commercial sex traffickers keeping the sites funded. So how a pedophile does their evil doings is simply a pedophile will have to share sex photos or videos or something with another pedophile person. That pedophile person has to invite the first person into the website. I just cannot Google it and look up child sex and come up with it. You have to actually be invited. So they basically question you. Are you motivated? Are you willing to share photos? What photos do you have? Are you willing to pay? Tell me about your appetite for children and what is it like? Do you glamorize these children? What's your arrest record? What is going on with your brain? And why would you want to be in this website? And that's what they do. That's why it's hard for law enforcement to get in these pedophile sites, excuse me, because it's invitation only most of the time, and you pay a fee, and you have to share sex videos or photos of children yourself. So you don't want to incriminate yourself, you don't go on those sites. So that being said, there's all kinds of dark webs. Now, there's a dark web, deep web, dark net, and there's a clear web. Well, I'll go through it in a minute or two, but dark web and deep web are similar. The deep web is really where all the sex trafficking goes. So you have, like the dark web might have world market selling drugs. You have Genesis market, illegal drugs, gray market, illegal drugs, the White House market, illegal drugs. Then you have other sites that simply want to sell sex trafficking stuff. You can have currency, a counterfeit currency rather. You have stolen credit cards. You have social security numbers. So all that stuff is on the web, and it's enormous. So the dark web and the deep web are password required. They're encrypted, basically sentences. An example would be like nonsensical phrases: crown, plant, rifle, valley, erect, neck, plant, etc. It could be 15 words long that have no match. So it's hard to break this. Pedophiles urge not to use any personal details. Pedophiles are required to share experiences. There's something called de-lurking, and that is a sex offender admits to passively viewing pedophile community sites and wants to now participate. They question you on this. You have to trade, of course. And then you have to express your gratitude for allowing you to be on that site. So you can see that this is kind of a cult where they're exchanging things over. They're looking at crazy stuff, but it goes deeper than that. And the deep web, there's another room called the red room. And this is not known as a room of pain or room of horror. And it's found through the Onion directory or the Tor browser. And if you know how to, what a VPN is, it's a virtual number. It's another layering crypto requirement where you basically put in a code that is always changing. And that way they can keep their sites private. Transactions are always paid in cryptocurrencies. It's always soliciting live stream recordings and videos of torture, mutilations, assassinations, murders, child rapes, mutilations, and they're real. There's 3 of them that I know of, and there's Shadow Web, Mariana's Web, and Real Snuff. So all those are horrible sites. It goes deeper into the psyche of a criminal mind. And this is a very expensive site. So you have to be a real professional pedophile or someone of criminal intent to go to this site. The random person will not find the site. So that being said, the federal government does seize websites, like I indicated earlier, and it's incredible because you have Europol working with FBI, DEA, even the Postal Service, the Marshal's Office. So people in Mexico or law enforcement in Mexico is working on this all over the country, or I'm sorry, all over the world. So you can see that there is a big interest in it. Now, anonymous social media sites that are linked to the deep web, and believe me, I was surprised to even find this out. Facebook has an anonymous deep web account, and that's incredible. So it could be that you don't want to be tracked. I don't know, but you have Facebook, you have Secure Share, you have Galaxy 3, Onion Social, Reddit, Middle Earth. That sounds like a gaming platform, but it's not. It's for selling illegal stuff. And then Dark World, Dread, and Connects. All these kind of fancy names, kind of exciting sounding names, really are enticing. And a parent, if you saw a child go on Middle Earth, you would think it would be just a simple game, but it's not. It's an actual illegal site. So conclusion would be predators are after sex photos and videos more aggressively because of COVID-19. Police forces are cut, numbers are down, investigators are very few and far between. You have to be an expert of this type of investigation. This is online stuff. This is like really deep stuff. And you really have to understand that it's changing every day. So with exchanges of virtual currency, the weaknesses of our laws that haven't caught up to our technology, the turmoil, our political turmoil, COVID-19 turmoil, we have a major problem with sex offenders preying on these poor kids during this time period. There's little to no restrictions on any of these sites. Sometimes there's peer pressure. Sometimes these kids get peer pressure from one another. There's enticement of money, drugs, adult attention. And of course, child predators are always on gaming sites, and they love to capture video conferences of children images. So you have that along with extortion of child sex videos. There's a lot of things going on. So that being said, how do we stop sex abuse and trafficking? One thing is we don't let our kids be isolated. We get to know our child and we get to know our child's friends. We restrict access to the web. We restrict and monitor phone calls. Talk to your children about the risk of social media and gaming sites. The government has to take back control of the internet. That's a huge one. FCC regulates and sets up punishment for abusers. International cooperation across the borders, anti-trafficking, anti-child exploitation sanctions. You sanction the country that allows it. Increase cyber investigations by tenfold, 100-fold. Then you have to train and have ongoing training of the investigators on technology and the rapid changes of the dark net. Basically, I would highly recommend we close down the dark net. There's no need for it. There is absolutely no need for it. It enables criminals to do their bidding, and it creates victims. That is about it. Any questions from the audience? Any comments?
Bryan.
Oh, yes, Kimberly.
Yes. How are we tracking these criminals online? Is there more to just tracking an IP address?
Oh, yes, because that IP address can be circumvented around the globe 20 to 30 times. So you have to be a pretty savvy IT person to find these individuals. And there is algorithms out there, like little hints. I believe there's a bank in Canada right now that they created a software where instead of looking for the big players, they're looking for the small players, like men in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, automatically sending small denominations of money to like the Philippines, or they're they're converting their money to virtual currency, and then it goes out to some other person. So those little flags, you can focus on what that person is doing, report it to law enforcement, and the law enforcement actually opens up a case, and then they follow the money. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mhm.
And how are the apps is there accountability for the applications out there where these third-party chat centers, like a Hangouts or a dating website, or is there accountability and tracking mechanisms with some of these applications that we have involved with communicating the way we communicate today?
Well, the website hosts are accountable, but the problem is there's so much out there. They're not really accountable, as we know, because of federal laws protecting them, but they can stop or terminate your membership if they see illegal activity. However, it is being done on nearly every social media platform, and it's very hard to police. So you start out with our typical platform that we see, like Instagram or Facebook or whatever it may be, and then they graduate to the dark web eventually, and that's where the really sick stuff happens. So there, you could probably find child pornography on every social media site if you look for it. The other issue is, how do you determine the pornography is of a child or an adult? So that's a law enforcement question and a court question. Like you could have a 16-year-old look like a 12-year-old, or a 23-year-old look like a 16-year-old, or vice versa, and they could get by with it. They could deny it. But because of hiding your identities, it's going to be hard to track those perpetrators, because if you're going through all these systems, all these layering, the onion, the Tor browsers, there's a lot of complicated issues to where you might see the activity, you may see the child pornography, but how do you reach the person that sent it? That's the big question.
Is the FAA holding the country accountable in as far as making laws to monitor criminal activity and scams amongst children and adults online?
Well, it's FCC actually has a big say in it, but the FBI does have internet crimes division, and there's a lot of states that still do. But the problem is the volume is so high that you typically get referred and you file a complaint and it goes nowhere unless there's something that triggered that agency to look into your case a little bit deeper. Possibly maybe 200 or 300 people complained about the same scenario. So that being said, I know that if I filed an internet crime, the chances of being investigated are probably zero. That's pretty sad. So we do need more investigators. We need more IT professionals to track down these criminals. Anything else? Okay, well, no other questions. You can reach me on Facebook Messenger or something, or social media. Call me, doesn't matter, email me, and I can give you further details. I didn't want to bore you all with this this presentation about it, but it's a very serious issue. COVID-19 has had a negative impact on our society, and it has enabled criminals to go amok with our kids. So hopefully we can regulate this and close down the dark net. Have a good evening.